So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 had a joke where it talked about how humans only live until they're around 50 years old. The whole crew was baffled. They were amazed by the short lifespans of humans, and it was this funny moment. But like I'm prone to do, I can't just take a joke as a joke. I am going to dig unnecessarily into it. And so it got me thinking, if 50 years is like nothing to the Guardians, how old are they? And more than that, how old is anyone else in this universe? The MCU has some crazy old beings in it. Well, the thing is, if I start looking into absolutely everyone we see in the MCU, it gets out of hand fast. There are some people with a lot of ambiguity, exactly how old they are, and a lot of really old beings to deal with. So to reel it in just a little bit, I looked at just the hero level people that we see in the MCU. The Avengers level. The type of people who fought against Thanos. And I tried to see, all right, let's just find the 3 oldest. And boy was I surprised when I discovered number 1.
No surprises.
So let's start with number 3. In third place, as the 3rd oldest Avengers level character, we have Thor Odinson. Now, his age was pretty easy to discover, as in Infinity War, he directly tells us. He says he's about 1,500 years old.
You know, I'm 1,500 years old.
Well, this sounds like a lot. He seems like he should easily be one of the oldest members of the Avengers. And he is. But he's only number 3 at 1,500 years old. The thing is, he has that Asgardian blood in him, where they don't age at the same level as anyone else. They have that extreme longevity. And Thor is young for an Asgardian. So that 1,500 years places him in 3rd. Moving on to 2nd, we have another Asgardian, Valkyrie. Now, we know that Valkyrie is older than Thor because Valkyrie fought against Hela before Thor was even born. We know that she's been stuck on Sakaar, having left and fled there and been hiding out there for at least 1,500 years. Well, that makes her older than Thor. And at the time when she fought Hela, she was fully grown. She was in the army of the Valkyries. She was established on Asgard. So she'd been around for quite a while after that. Now, we don't know exactly how old she is, but some of the sources online estimate her age should be around 5,000 years old. And so that puts her at number 2. But wait a minute, there's a little more to her story. Now you see, she's 5,000 years old based on what we know of Asgard's time and Earth's time, but she spent at least 1,500 years on Sakaar. And as we know,
Time works real different around these parts.
you see, when Loki and Thor were knocked out of the Bifrost and sent to Sakaar, well, they left the Bifrost approximately 10 to 11 seconds apart. But they arrived on Sakaar almost 2 weeks apart.
Bifrost found me out here weeks ago.
I just got it.
This tells us that time is very different on Sakaar. If we do that math, we can estimate that about 1 second in outside time corresponds to about a day on Sakaar. And so if we look at that and we consider the fact that Valkyrie has been there for 1,500 years, well, that adds an additional approximately 130 million years to her lifespan on Sakaar. That is a crazy amount of time. Does that mean that she's then 130 million and 5,000 years old? Well, no, it doesn't. As interesting as that is, I don't think time is working just exactly that way on Sakaar. We know that time works differently on Sakaar, but nowhere does it say it works consistently. And there's actually a lot of evidence to show that it doesn't work consistently. You see, we're told that the Hulk has been there around 2 years. Is that 2 years of Sakaar time? Well, that corresponds fairly well with what we see from the other movies. The time that Bruce Banner has been gone. So we can at least compare that that's around accurate. But more than that, Thor spends about 2 days on Sakaar in Thor Ragnarok. That time when he is there, Hela has plenty of time to essentially take over Asgard, to set it up, to essentially establish herself as its new ruler, and that's going to take more than 2 seconds. And if the timing was consistent, then 2 days for Thor on Sakaar should have only been 2 seconds of time for Hela. So it's clear that time, even though it works differently, is not a consistent way that we can track it of just speeding up or slowing down that time. In fact, with it being so fairly accurate between Thor on Sakaar and Hela taking over Asgard, I think it's safe to say that the time kind of gives and takes between Sakaar and the rest of the world. That sometimes it's longer and sometimes it's shorter. So what can we say about Valkyrie's 1500 years there? It's probably fairly close to 1500 years. We don't know exactly how long it's been. It could be more, it could be less, but I don't think we can say that it's substantially more, so we're not going to give her that extra 130 million. So that puts her in second with 5,000 years approximately of age. Well, hold on a second. If she's in second with 5,000, who's in first? Well, to reveal who is actually the oldest, I'm going to perform a bit of a magic trick. Doctor Strange. Wait, what? How can Doctor Strange be the oldest? How can he be older than 5,000 years old? I mean, he's from Earth. He's human. That's where this whole conversation started. The joke was they lived to around 50. That's far less than 5,000. But you see, there's a bit of a trick to Doctor Strange's age. You see, just like how Valkyrie spent time on Sakaar and time was different there, Doctor Strange has a trick as well, except his is a little more consistent and a little more measurable.
You're full of tricks, wizard.
Now, Doctor Strange's age is estimated to be around 40-ish years old right now in the MCU. That's inconsequential compared to his Asgardian friends. But you see, there are 2 times when he used the Time Stone to set himself in a situation that allowed him to live much longer than what we see on the screen. And the first of these comes at the end of Doctor Strange, his first movie. And in this one, he is bargaining with Dormammu, and he sets himself up in a time loop. It allows him to live the same moment over and over and over. And we see that in this time, he is improving. It's essentially like a montage where he is constantly getting better at his magic. But the focus here is trying to get Dormammu to give up and stop killing him. But we know that a lot of time passes during this because he is using his spells and he is getting better and better at defensive magic, fighting off Dormammu. The thing is, how many times did he cycle? We don't know. We see about a dozen or so times in the movie. But there's a lot of indication that it's a lot more than this. It could be a dozen, could be 2 dozen, could be 100, could be 1,000. For the sake of measurement, since we need some measurement, let's say it's around 100 times that he got reset before Dormammu gave up and finally allowed him to bargain. The thing is, each of these cycles was pretty short, maybe 1 to 2 minutes apiece. So if each of these bonus lives that Doctor Strange had given himself through this time loop was about 1 minute to 2 minutes each, and he did it about 100 times, that's maybe 2 hours? That doesn't really move the needle on his age. That puts him at 40 years and about 2 hours. That's not enough to compete with the Asgardians. What does make a difference is when he does this again in Infinity War. They are preparing for Thanos to do battle with him. And Doctor Strange settles down and gets into a meditative position, and his head starts whipping around. He uses the Time Stone, as he says, to see into all the possible futures. Except he doesn't say he was seeing into the futures. He tells us that he was going into the futures, that he was living the futures.
Went forward in time to view alternate futures.
This tells us that essentially he's doing the same thing we saw with Dormammu. He is setting a time loop, and he's going forward and living his life forward, living the conflict with Thanos and its impacts over and over and over, trying to find the way that we win. If he is cycling his life over and over, it means he's actually living every single one of these timelines. So, to know how much we need to add to his life to account for this, we need to know how many times he went through this cycle and approximately how long each one of these cycles were. Well, we know exactly how many times he went into the future to explore another timeline. He tells us he looks at
14,605,000.
That's a lot. Okay, but how long does he spend there? Is it only a few seconds? Well, no, we know it's more than that. In the one that we succeed, we know that he's there for probably close to a day before he warps back. Now, they wait for Thanos to arrive. They do battle with him. Thanos then gets back to Earth, does the battle there, snaps his fingers. At that time, his time in that timeline should stop. He's not living it anymore. But then, at the end, when the snap is reversed, Doctor Strange is back. And then he starts gathering people for the oncoming fight then. At least a day is taken up between the fighting Thanos and the fighting the next Thanos after the snap. But I don't think that's the norm. What do we know about Doctor Strange? We know he's incredibly arrogant. And so when he is looking for a future where they win, he's going to be looking for a future where he causes them to win, because he's going to believe himself their best bet. So he's going to spend time trying to find ways to have him part of the group that survives that snap, or to prevent the snap in its entirety. And in those universes, those timelines, he's going to live his life forward much longer than a day. And if it's situations where the snap happens and he's part of the half that survives, it's going to be years. But for the sake of convenience and measurement, let's say he does only spend about a day in each of these 14,605 timelines. Do you know what that comes out to? That adds a whopping 38,458 years to his lifetime. That's if he spends one day in each of the futures that he decided to live through. And that is why he gets spot number 1.
All right.
So what do you think? Do you think I am calculating this wrong and that Doctor Strange should not get credit for that additional almost 40,000 years when he was living other lives trying to figure out how to stop Thanos? Do you think I should have counted the time on Sakaar, that estimate of time expansion, and that Valkyrie should have gotten much more credit, 130 million years of credit, to her name? Or do you think there's another hero out there that I'm completely missing? Someone who might pass that 40,000 years of Dr. Stephen Strange? Let me know in your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, thank you for watching.